what brings you here to this marvelous opportunity to talk about your work?
Hello. My name is Lynn M. Thomas. I'm currently the co-editor-in-chief and co-publisher of Uncanny Magazine, an online professional science fiction and fantasy venue. We have been open since August of last year. Before that, I was the editor-in-chief of Apex Magazine, also a professional rate-paying online magazine, and I have edited, co-edited the fiction anthology Glitter and Mayhem, which was a Kickstarter project, and I'm the co-editor of, hello, we're just in introductions, please come in, come in.
We didn't make it.
You made it, you made it.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Paul Cornell, like playing the British accent.
It's always Paul Cornell's fault.
Indeed.
That's the rule. I'm also the Hugo Award-winning editor of co-editor of Chicks Dig Time Lords, a nonfiction anthology, as well as having co-edited the follow-ups Sweetnistas and Chicks Dig Comics. So that's me. I do nonfiction and fiction, kickstarted and not.
Well, since we're working on that end of the table.
Oh, hi. Catch you up.
I'm Catherine Lenoff. In your absence, I got elected moderator because
fantastic.
that's how we roll here.
I
So,
can do anthology makers, yes.
okay, so since Lynn's just finished, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and
Okay.
look down this end, and then I'll go last.
I am Tony Weisskopf, from publisher of Bain Books. And one of the ways Jim Bain trained young editors was to throw anthologies at them and say, here, edit this.
That's me.
Very sink or swim kind of attitude, but I did start very early in my career working on anthologies and learning how to put them together and learning how to negotiate with agents, and not slitting my wrist after negotiating with agents. So. Any agents on the panel?
Nope.
No, okay.
No.
You're safe.
Although this is being videotaped, so.
I love agents, love them.
Okay, I'll go last, so.
Okay. Are we gonna go? Okay. I'm Tim Leader. I own and operate Dybbuk Press. It's a pretty small press. I started by being a frustrated writer who wanted to stick my own story in an anthology full of short stories, and I learned every way how not to do an anthology. It was kind of fun. And I currently publish maybe one or two books a year. It's just pretty small. The last one was King David and the Spiders from Mars, Bible-themed horror story collections, and somehow the Bible-themed horror story zeitgeist is yet to hit, but I'm hoping.
Yep, I'm Roy. I'm from, I represent, I'm actually acquisitions editor for India Authors Press out of London and Santiago, Chile, of all places. Our latest anthology was a cyberpunk Altered States with John Shirley and CJ Charity and some other folks. So.
My name is Catherine Lundoff, and hey, I drew the short story for moderator today. Lucky you. And I'm editor or co-editor of two anthologies, Haunted Hearts and Sapphic Shades, which is a collection of lesbian ghost stories, and Hellebore Rue, which is a collection of fantasy stories about magic users. So that's been my experience. I haven't done any magazine editing yet, and yeah, so it sounds like we've got a nice mix of people who are doing different things. One of the things that we talked about doing was trying to roughly break this up into structure and business issues. Please raise your hand if you have questions. I will call on you, and we can either do Q&A at the end, or we can do Q&A along the way if people have questions that are pertinent to what we're currently discussing. So in terms of how you go about structuring an anthology, why don't we start there? So would anyone like to kick off with some of the things that they did, that they liked or didn't like?
I can talk a little bit about our philosophy on the books that I've worked on with myself, my husband, and my co-editors. When it comes to the structure of an anthology, the way that we view it is, for those of you that are over the age of 20, it's called a mixtape. The way that we think about it is like that. What we are looking for, regardless of whether it's a really tight theme or a really loose theme, what we are looking for is enough variety to keep interest as you move from story to story throughout the anthology. We structure our anthologies so that there is a specific emotional arc that will happen if you read it from cover to cover. But we also don't assume that people will read it from cover to cover. Obviously you pick strong stories to begin with, but we sort of we have tentpole stories, so the opening story and the closing story in our anthologies at least tend to be the strongest stories we have. That's not always the biggest names, but they're the ones that are gonna grab you. Where there's usually a very strong story right at the center of the anthology, or at the 1/3 and 2/3 points, depending on how long it is, because those are the sort of tent poles that when you've got a story where there's less emotional impact or there's a couple of things that are on the same theme, you try to not put them next to each other, you don't want it to get samey. So our philosophy tends to be, try to make it like a mixtape. Keep it interesting, keep the reader engaged so that it is an experience that feels like this as you're going through, if you go straight through, but every story should be strong enough to stand on its own if you're the kind of reader who just goes, oh, I just want to read the person whose name I recognize.
I got nothing to argue with there, yeah.
Okay, is everybody clear on what a themed anthology is?
No.
No.
Okay. Way to go, way to step up there.
Yeah.
All right, themed anthologies are usually something built around something specific, like, for example, biblical horror or lesbian ghost stories, but they're built around something where all of the stories are supposed to be connected to that theme. And one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking in terms of, tentpole stories and how you construct that arc is that anthologies can be either invite only, or they can be open submission, or a mix of both. And it's not uncommon to invite authors who you know will provide you with a reliable product that you can put in there at those two ends, and then open it up. And there's a number of ways of going about doing that. So I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about how you structured that part of it. When you did your anthologies, were they all open? Were they invite? Why did you make those choices?
Well, for ours, it was both an invite and open call, so to speak. Basically, for this one, I got a hold of William F. Wu, since he's done, cyberpunk, and we had him do that. And then I got a hold of Paul Levinson, who also did an introduction. So we've got them. We did our tentpole, so basically in 4 different spots. We did in quarters, and we got also like I said, C.J. Cherry in there and John Shirley. And we kind of balanced it out that way, so we had more of a traditional cyberpunk along the ways of the cyborg, which we went with CJ's story, and then we had more of the experimental stuff with Paul later on. We just try to keep it more balanced that way, do more of a wide variety of different types of cyberpunk.
Yeah, I'm small press and I can't afford to pay professional rates, so a lot of it was begging my friends to submit. And I mean, the last anthology was like mostly people that I knew, but a couple great stories out of the slush pile too. All my anthologies are open, and I pay like $50 or $100 depending on.
Where do you announce your opening your
Dual
slush
trope?
pile? Does everybody know what a slush pile is, by the way? No? Okay. Slush pile is where people that we haven't specifically said, hey, write me a story, can just send a story when they hear about it. But how do people hear about it?
Duotrope and my blog and whatever. I mean, I did get a lot of stories, but they're all the same theme. That was.
A lot is 50, 100, 2,000. What are we talking?
50, 100 to 200. So not a lot here, but.
But yeah, just to give people an idea of what the odds are.
Yeah, for me it's varied. My nonfiction anthologies have been much more invitation-based and strong-arming dear friends at first, and then over time we've had more open slots because we had specific non-fictional stories we needed to tell. So it was like, I need a costumer, I need someone who does fan fiction. Because we were talking about specific experiences and we're trying to get a wide swath. Glitter and Mayhem was a Kickstarted anthology, and we had and I don't recommend doing this. We put together the antho in 3 months. Never ever do that.
It seems very fast.
It was incredibly fast, and we're never ever doing it again. And there were 3 editors, and we had slush editors. We had, when we went live with the Kickstarter, we had already solicited, I think, about 12 to 15 authors. Because you need the names to draw people to give money to the Kickstarter who say, shut up and give my money, I want to see them write this kind of story. And then we also opened to submissions, and in the window of submissions, which was less than a month long, I think we had about 350 submissions. And out of that, there were a total, I think, of between 5 and 6 slots based on word count that was available out of those 300 submissions for people we hadn't solicited directly.
And how did you advertise the Kickstarter? How did you advertise?
Everywhere we possibly could. With the Kickstarter, you set up Kickstarter, and then we did as big a social media blanket as we could. So we were constantly talking about it on Twitter. We were constantly talking about it on Facebook. Now by the time we kickstarted Glitter and Mayhem, we were already an established brand through the Chicks book. So we had a small fan base of people who knew that we could deliver a product, and we were trying to sort of capitalize on that and move into a new area. And we were already also editors at Apex Magazine, so we were using their platform as well. So we had a platform to begin with. We also did blog tours. So I wrote for John Scalzi's blog. I did The Big Idea, which is one of his. He does promo posts, and when John says yes, you'll take it. You give it to him because that's 100,000 readers. We did posts on Mary Robinette Kowal's blog and a couple of other places. So we basically blanketed the internet as hard as we could, and you feel as though you are screaming at the top of your lungs the entire time.
And dancing.
And dancing. It really does feel like Dance Monkey Dance for an entire month as you try to kickstart. And even when you are successful, especially when you're successful, you will feel like that, and you will still come across people who like years later will be like, I didn't even hear about that, and you're like, are you kidding me? So that was how we did it. It was just a lot of social media push.
Yeah, we did something for the 2 anthologies that I worked on. One of the things that we did, because these are small press anthologies and they're themed, we actually asked everyone, the writers we invited as well as the open call writers, to query with their ideas first. And one reason we did this was to cut down on the number of stories that read exactly the same way, but also to cut down on that fabulous window after an anthology closes and all of the rejects go out to all the magazines, and people have spent all this time writing a story for a themed anthology that didn't fit the anthology, and ooh, it's cannibalism month. So as a way to kind of sidestep that, and one of the advantages to that was it meant that people put more thought into their stories. They weren't just sending us trunk ideas. And it meant that we didn't have a gigantic slush pile, which was kind of important at the time, because we did not have slush readers. So it was something that, it worked well the first anthology, so we tried it again on the second one. I did it the first time, and then when I worked with my co-editor, Joselle Vanderhoof, we did it on our second anthology as well. And it really kind of helped coordinate things, but it also helped us structure the books differently, I think, than we might have done without having done that.
Yeah.
How do you mean?
We were less dependent. I mean, the thing about inviting authors and inviting your friends is that even your friends, glorious and brilliant and wonderful as they are, will write the occasional dud. And you will get, we've all had it. We've picked up an anthology because it's got a story by an author, we love it, and we're reading it like, this is the only thing of yours I don't like. And the chances are good that the editors had that reaction too, but because they had already invited this person in, they felt obligated to take it.
It is. It's bad form if you invite somebody who does write for a living or write professionally, then to then reject something that they've it doesn't. You can certainly ask for revisions, but that becomes tricky, and friendships are
some
broken.
things are just not revisable, unfortunately, sadly. But yeah, so it gave us a lot of opportunity to think about structure because things were coming in gradually. It was like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's see what you can do with it. And if we get this story that works out, that can go here and that can go there. And there were still some things we shot down, even though we liked the ideas and we didn't like the final product.
So you took 3 months. How long? We're going to take that as a bottom.
My other anthos took a year, which is a little more reasonable.
How about you? Did you
Probably 6 to 7 months.
6 to 7 months,
on each book.
And that's with 2 head editors.
Well, that was one book I did with somebody else, and the other book I did by myself with publisher approval. So
Why do you think so many anthologies are by more than one person?
Because it's a lot of keeping up on email.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel
But
like
doesn't adding another person just add more confusion to that layer?
I live with the other person, so that makes it slightly easier because we can talk about this stuff over breakfast. But most of my anthos have been co-editing because, well, that's my daughter back there.
Hey.
and she's hanging out with her and stuff.
So-
And that means that our attention is often divided. So the advantage that I feel, it has helped me to be able to bring folks who I thought had potential into the business and sort of train them up a little bit in how we edit anthos. So part of it is paying it forward after people have given me a chance.
Yeah.
And part of it is that there will be days when I cannot focus on that because I have other concerns, and what that means is I can email my co-editor and say, I need you to take care of this specific list of things in, here's the ball, your turn,
Yeah.
please run.
Yeah.
And
My daughter has special needs too, so
Yeah,
I've definitely,
yeah.
editing is a good field for parents whose attention
it's
sometimes are
divided.
needed.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So yeah, one of the main reasons for us is, I'm a librarian in my day job. We do everything by committee, so it seems weird to me to do things alone, frankly.
Yeah, okay. How about you guys? I'm sorry.
I've taken a long
There was an
time.
election, but it doesn't matter.
Way to overrule that.
Since I'm usually in a position of begging for stories, I can take like up to a year to put something together.
Mhm.
And I've noticed actually something that I actually sold a story to Anthology last year just because I knew that stories were needed, because he extended the deadline 6 months and said, please, no steampunk. And
This was a clue.
yes,
That's a very big clue.
it's not like he doesn't have stories, he just doesn't have ones he wanted. So.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, ours was about 6 to 7 months also, and we had about 250 submissions or not. And to elaborate more on the submissions process, I just sold a story to the new revised Weird Book,
Mhm.
and I found they had like 550 plus submissions for that one. And the problem they had is they didn't have a slush pile readers until the very end. So that kind of got bogged down a little bit. I know when I work with Hargate, who is also the publisher, usually he looks at whatever comes in first, sees it, meets the basic submission guidelines, and then I actually do an actual reading of it, and I do the traditional 5-paragraph, does it grab me or not?
Really, that much? Huh.
Well, if I stretch it, I'm trying to be nice out there.
Yeah, we're not kidding, by the way.
No.
Yeah.
But truth be told, for me, it's usually about 5 sentences. And if there's a little kernel, whatever.
We're special needs moms. We are totally ruthless.
You have to be.
Oh,
To
yeah.
a certain extent, you have to be. One of the best pieces of advice that we learned when talking to writers was, because especially with themed anthos, you tend to get sort of you pick a theme and then you get a swath of stories that all have the most obvious variations
Yes.
on the theme.
Right.
Yes.
Your chances, especially if you're not as well established as a writer, of getting through the slush pile is to be interesting in relation to the theme. Do something different or quirky, or not the most obvious option with the main theme.
You have to work harder than.
You have to work harder than
New
the
York Times
established
bestseller
New York Times
author.
bestsellers that, the thing is, the New York Times bestsellers are there for a purpose, not only to produce a great story, hopefully, but also because if you're working particularly with a large publishing house, they will not pay you or the writers if you don't have someone whose name is a brand name that they can sell the antho with.
Yes,
It's
this is
different
true.
with small press. You have a bit more leeway. But generally speaking, like if you decide that you're going to do a vampire anthology and you want to do it through a major New York house, you best have Charlene Harris on your roster.
That's a good idea.
It's a good plan because it won't get bought otherwise. You'll have a very difficult time selling that anthology to a major New York house because most anthologies through New York houses, with a couple of very outlier exceptions, they don't actually make their money back. They're not big money makers unless they have someone like Charlene Harris or Neil Gaiman or one of the other people who, can blow their nose and end up on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah, we're not a New York house anymore, so we have to try harder, and all of our books make money.
Yeah.
We don't publish it if we don't think it's not going to make.
But
make
making
us
money
nuts.
is a relative term.
To be sure.
In terms of scale.
To be sure, yeah.
The expectations at a New York Times house for an anthology are radically different than at a smaller house or at the very small houses that I was working with to begin with.
Going back to how long does it take to make the sausage? I think we can accept as the quickest time, your time, hands off.
You win! In fairness, our solicited authors already had the theme and had started writing while we were kickstarting.
Okay,
So
right.
we had a little bit of a head start because when we put together the Antho, we had sort of taken the temperature of the friends we were going to strong arm
Yeah.
and said, okay, we want to do a party anthology. That was, Glitter and Mayhem is designed to be a science fictional party anthology. So what it was basically what happens at night? Is it clubs? Is it drugs? Is it? Yeah, it was an adult
Yes.
anthology. Yes, but it was like those were the kinds of stories that we wanted. We wanted sort of the weird stuff that happens at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're not sure if it's science fictional or if you're just hallucinating. Like that was the kind of thing we were looking for.
Cool.
And we had people who were super excited about the theme, who were like, oh yeah, totally have an idea, and they were like, people brought their A game because it was such a weird concept at the time. Like they thought that was the best idea ever, and they really brought great stories. But they were already writing when we were kickstarting because they just loved the theme so much.
And there were people who stayed up past 2 a.m. just for
Just
the
to see,
anthology.
yep.
Okay. Yeah.
So, the 3 months was the actual getting through the slush, doing edits and copy edits and line edits where they were needed, and then actually producing the book. We had raised the money beforehand. We had, and there were 3 editors on that book. So it was myself and my husband and John Klima from Electric Philosophy, who's currently the editor of the Sophia team. So we had a lot of people. There were many hands to make it happen that fast.
And I'm gonna set as an upper limit Harlan Ellison's Last Dangerous Vision, which is approaching infinity. So.
Yeah, don't do that.
So actually, Tony, are there some things that are specific to how Bain does the anthologies that you'd like to talk about? Because most of us have been working with smaller presses, and you've got a different experience. So
Well,
let's hear them.
one of the things that we do that is slightly different from the kind of anthology that we're talking about here. We have an idea. There's a lot of stories that bring changes on these ideas. Is the Shared World anthology. Jim Bain did the first one, Thieves' World, at ACE, at least the first modern Shared World, and we're into year 26 of the magazine wars, which is people writing in Larry Niven's known universe. And talking in that unit, in that for that particular set of anthologies, we do exactly the same thing. We have people propose ideas. Larry shoots 90% of them down. It's his world. It's his universe. He's very particular about what he wants in it. And the names that he has said, no, you can't write this story for my universe, would make you cry. but what he cares about is the story. He cares not at all about your name. All he cares about is what you're doing in his playground. The reason he opened it up in the first place was because he didn't feel he could tell good military science fiction stories. And there was an audience request for this kind of thing. So he said, well, my pal Paul Anderson, he does good military stuff, and Jerry Cornell does good military stuff. And Jim went, yes, we can make this happen.
That's a big bet as a publisher.
It is, and one of the things that I find about the Shared World anthology is that more than one person's ego is on the line. So Paul Anderson is going to write a good story for anybody's anthology, but because he's playing in Larry's universe, he's really got to step up.
He's bringing his A game.
He is bringing his A game. Dean Ing, I think, wrote one of Dean Ing's best stories for the Mancazin Wars. I think it's very much like, it is imposing restraints on a writer. It is giving borders and boundaries. But I think that in some cases, what this is the same kind of imposition of form and order that you get when you're writing in a sonnet form. You get precisely because you are constrained, you are challenged to make something of this form that nobody else has done. And I think you can get really good work that way. So we do a good number of these Shared World anthologies. We do Honorverse, David Weber's Honorverse. We're doing 2 new ones coming up next year. John Ringo's Black Tide Rising, Zombie Apocalypse anthology, and then on a lighter note, the Monster Hunter International Universe, Larry Correa's is opening up. And these are all invitation only. If you don't already know Larry Correa, then you are doomed. So, yeah. So does that?
But I think one of the things that we've sort of touched on a little bit, but we haven't really, fleshed out, is the fabulous world of editorial subjectivity, in which we talk about it, and how things. I mean, the difference between how you may visualize as an editor that an anthology is going to look, and the way that the stories that come in actually shape how you interpret that is occasionally very different. But at least it certainly adds certain layers of nuance to it. So I guess I'd like to talk a little more about what for you drove your concept of what something was that fit those anthologies. I mean, apart from inviting and then accepting name authors that you were hoping would drive sales. In addition to that, for things that came in over the transom, but even for things that came in from people you knew, how do you determine what fits a theme?
I think it's a lot like the concept of pornography, when you see it.
There you go. Skippy is porn.
Well, it varies from antho to antho in my experience. With the nonfiction anthos that we were doing, we had sort of specific stories we wanted to tell, or specific perspectives we wanted. So like with Chick Stick Comics, it was like, well, we've got so many people writing about Marvel, we need someone to write about DC, and we definitely need someone to write about indie comics because we haven't covered that yet. So it's a topic coverage issue. With Glitter and Mayhem, we had a couple of things that were people who had known us a little bit, who had queried because they wanted to do something that they thought was sort of way in left field, but that worked really well for us. Mm-hmm. But what for us was important was a strong emotional core to the story, and if you look at my history as an editor, both in nonfiction and in fiction, that is just something that I, as an editor, look for. I look for a strong emotional core in the stories that I select. That's just who I am as an editor. If I don't care about your characters, your story is unlikely to grab my attention in the way that you want it to. But everybody's different. Some editors are much more about world building, or much more about the big idea or the sense of wonder, and it varies from editor to editor, which is why we have all these different markets, because if we all had exactly the same taste, how boring would that be?
Indeed. That's so true. You guys have been really quiet.
Sorry?
You should talk. You should talk.
Okay, so for my last themed anthology, well, the last two themed anthologies, the problem is when you want Bible as literature as a topic, you get a lot of dumb stuff, because a lot of people do not even read the Bible, much less approach it as literature. And so I got a lot of like serial killers who suddenly remember that Jesus was Lord or something like that. For the second anthology, I want to limit it to only the King David stories. I finally expanded and said, whatever you want to do, but I got so many Witch of Endor and King Saul stories. This story, Saul goes to the Witch of Endor, calls up the old prophet. The old prophet says, hey, you're gonna die. Saul goes out to war and dies. Oh, always these happy stories that you love. But I just kept getting. It was like I already bought one of these for the last one, and I guess but then again, I'm a small press, so beggars can't be choosers. But then of course I am a chooser, so that's terrible. But then of course then you get a lot of garbage, and so you're begging your friends, and like my friend rescued me with this story called Chabad of Innsmouth, where it's like the Hasidic Jew goes to Innsmouth and tries to set up Chabad house, and realizes that everyone's a Cthulhu fish god.
There you go.
Oops.
Yeah, with ours, we knew going in that we'd find a lot of weird experimental stuff that we just have to avoid, because we'd probably lose a good part of our leadership that way. And people trying to do things with strange forms on the structure of the story itself. Mm-hmm. Weird indentations and that thing. After a while, I thought maybe we were trying to do like poetry more or less than stories.
And that makes my editorial antenna go, ooh, weird stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
well, there's weird, and then there's weird.
Well, weird to a point. I mean, if the weird is for a particular effect,
Mm-hmm.
then lovely. But if it's just weird
to be weird. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
weird,
it's a fine line, because the real difficulty with anything that is going to mess with story structure,
Right.
is the real challenge is that you have to land it. Like you have to if you're going to do a wacky writer trick of any kind, you have to execute it flawlessly. Because if you don't execute that particular writer trick flawlessly, the entire story falls apart.
for me, I find it it is very hard both to say something in an interesting way and have something interesting to say. And if I have to pick one, I choose interesting to say.
Yeah. An odd thing I found with ours is we got a whole bunch of stories where, they try to show the brain damage or process of a cyborg where they have like an inner monologue and they have to stop. And I'd say, well, okay, that may be what you're trying to do, show the damage and whatnot, but when someone reads this, they're gonna think either you didn't finish the story or the editors didn't know what we're doing. You think it's cool, but.
And Keith Laumer did it a million years before you.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, one of the experiences that I had when working on Haunted Hearts and Sapphic Shades, and this is with asking people to query, is I had the following exchange with a published author, known quantity. He sent in a story description for what he wanted to write, and I came back and said, I'm not clear on how this fits the theme, can you explain? And we went through several exchanges until what I got it down to was, is there something dead in here? Because I do not see a ghost. Which was followed by, I also do not see a lesbian, so how are we making this work? But it's the kind of thing that you get sometimes when you're working on themed anthologies, and how people interpret that theme and how they're hoping you're going to stretch the boundaries of it to incorporate what you're doing. And sometimes you can, and sometimes no.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a matter of how successful it is at stretching the boundaries. So we had some sort of time travel to old party stories that worked really well. And for the thing that we learned with Glitter and Mayhem was that a lot of nerds don't go to clubs.
I'm shocked.
What we found was that, particularly in our slush, there was a big swath of stories that made it very, very clear that the only experience of going to a nightclub was watching the Bronze on Buffy. Which
You mean that's not typical?
it's not.
The
The experience of being in a nightclub is different than it is watching one on television. It's physically different. It's experienced differently, and it just didn't
we had
translate.
an author who was so dedicated to his art that he actually went to a sex club in San Francisco just to get his
And that would
story
be
right.
fine. That's research. Like that. If we had gotten that story, we would have been okay with
All the
that.
sweaty details seem to me, who has not gone to such a club, to be correct.
As
So,
long as
yeah.
they're truthful enough, then it's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had, but you could tell the people who
And
had
if you
actually
do go to such a
done that.
club, use protection. Yeah, okay, okay.
Practice safe editing. And
Yes,
writing.
exactly.
And research.
Practice safe research, always important.
Okay, yeah, sometimes you get surprised.
Yeah.
And that's fun.
Yes, sometimes surprises are really good. Yes, we have a question.
How do rates compare, for example, if you're doing like probably more magazine-sized stories that are, let's say, 7,000 words or less or something? How does the rate compare for the author for an anthology compared with selling it to a magazine? And then also with that, if it's you're writing larger stories that take up a bigger part of the anthology, let's say it has maybe 4 stories in it, how does the rate compare then to like doing a novel? And again, it's for professional rates.
The word you're looking for is highly variable.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're trying to make a living at short fiction, don't. It's going to be very difficult, frankly, at least specifically in genre, because the level of market penetration you have to have in anthos and short fiction and be reprinted consistently to make enough money at the current professional rates is, you'd have to pump out a massive amount of workable fiction. And that's just hard to do.
What the message here is, though, is that the slush piles for short stories and anthologies are much smaller than for the novels. So if you're using the short story markets to break in and get your name known, good strategy. If you happen to be the kind of person who can write short stories.
Yeah, which is a different skill than novel writing.
Yes.
It absolutely is. And it is a useful skill to have, because even as you make your name as a novel writer, people will ask you to write short stories for things, and you will want to.
Yes.
So it's a useful skill to acquire if you can do it.
But the pay rate will vary from market to market. So Uncanny, as a magazine, currently, we pay 8 cents a word, and we cut off at 7,500 words, I think is our current cutoff. And that's that.
Is 8 cents a word the current CIFLA pro rate?
No, it's a little bit above. 7 is the current pro rate. We're all trying really hard to eat just above it to set ourselves apart. I mean, basically, if you're looking to make bank, Tor.com is where you send your stories, because they are throwing money around like talking scissors. They have They have really high per word rates, and they pay royalties on some formula that is completely unknown to me. So if you can crack their market, and if you can wait the sometimes 2 to 3 years for them to get to your story, it can be worth the money. Those are big ifs.
Kind of a sidebar to this before I bring up pay rates and sizes here, is that almost every publication has got some kind of word limit. So it's not like you're going to be able to send them 40,000 words and it has much of a chance of getting published. It really depends on the need and what their limitations are. But something worth noting is that while the slush piles for short stories, for short story publications are smaller than the ones for novels, the slush piles for magazines, especially the big magazines, are
Huge.
very large, and the ones for themed anthologies tend to be smaller. So if you're looking for an opportunity at a first publication, you have a better shot there.
Uncanny opened for a week, and we got 850 submissions in a week, which we are slowly, really slowly working our way through. And that's with 10 slush readers and 2 editors.
So a good investment is, a drink for an anthology editor, I'm just saying.
It doesn't hurt.
And was it the novella editor for Tor.com is here?
Yeah.
Because he guested at the con? So
Yeah, Lee Harris is the editor for the novella line for Tor.com.
Don't
He's
tell
the
him
other
we
British
sent you.
person. He's the other British person who is not Paul Cornell.
Right.
And if you don't like what Lee has to say, he's apparently saying that if you enjoyed his work on the panel, he's Lee Harris. If you didn't, he's Paul Cornell. So
I see, okay.
it's fulfilling the Paul Cornell gets blamed for everything.
I'm gonna say the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
You're
gonna
gonna have to be Paul Cornell, if you don't like me.
It's kind of a stretch. I'd maybe pick some. So, is there anything you'd like to say about word lengths and payment? Because there's also different limitations based on whether or not you're kickstarting something versus whether or not you're paying it out of pocket.
How do you make the decision to kickstart something instead of going through your own publishing house or your friends or what have you?
We didn't have, with Glitter and Mayhem, with the nonfiction anthologies, we had already developed a relationship with the nonfiction publisher. I was brought on to help finish a book that was stalled. I had already done a book-shaped project for an academic publisher in my day job, so I had proven the ability to complete a book-length project. And that's how I got brought into Chickstick Time Lords, and then things kind of went boom from there. That's a really short version of it, but there you go. With Apex Magazine, with Glitter and Mayhem, we partnered. So the way that we did it was that we kickstarted the costs of paying the writers and the artist, but the distribution was done through Apex Publications, with whom we already had a publishing relationship. And so we split the expenses as best we could, and in theory split the profits as best we could. I'm still determining who came out better off in that particular deal. With Uncanny, we decided to kickstart the magazine because we didn't have the funds to start up a magazine on our own. And we were hopeful that we had done good enough work over the previous 5 years and built enough of a platform and enough folks who liked what we did that would be in sufficient inducement for them to provide the seed funding. Because, I'm a librarian and my husband is a stay-at-home parent of a special needs child. We didn't have the money to just start a small press. And so, we've set everything up so that Uncanny is a separate business, separate accounts. It's all, that money is not used for anything but the magazine. We keep everything separate, but none of our household money is in there because we couldn't afford to do that if we wanted to.
You've heard how to make a small fortune in publishing, right?
Yes, you begin with a large budget.
correct.
Yeah. Just, as a rough guideline, we kickstarted about $36,000 to start the magazine. So that's all the startup costs, web design, fulfilling the Kickstarter in that sense, paying all of our authors 8 cents a word, paying for cover art, all that kind of stuff. We made stretch goals and it was great. Taxes took a big chunk of that. The Kickstarter fees took a big chunk of that. We were still doing things like trying to find advertising and selling subscriptions and individual issues through this first year. When we go into Kickstarter year 2, by our current calculations, we have made about 25% through subscriptions and sales and advertising. 25% of our actual costs are covered at this point, which is why we had to kickstart year 2 if we want to continue, because we can't make up that 75% of the costs. It's just not possible. I'm sorry, but I'm trying really hard to be a responsible adult. I'm not cracking open my 401k for a magazine. No.
Oh, come on.
No. No. Damn, no.
I got rid of mine long years ago. It's,
Right, that is the, sort of siren call,
Yeah.
and a lot of people have. It's a very dangerous path to fall down, because these are your friends, right? These are the writers and illustrators that you wanted to work with, and you want to make sure everybody is covered.
Yeah.
But it is dangerous. So I think that the fact that there's Kickstarter and other crowdfunding resources is actually a very good thing.
It's
for-
great.
for-
We would
for
never have done
publishing.
it without it,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
It wouldn't, we would have gone off into the sunset when Kate had her surgery, and that would have been that. We would have,
But
done us.
how do you make these kind of cold, hard decisions?
Well, the first anthology that I edited, I was actually invited to edit, and the second one went through another small press, so I didn't actually do any crowdsourcing. Did you?
No.
Did you do any
I did crowdsourcing for the last book just because I realized there was a possibility and then I could do it with the other funding source, not Kickstarter, the one that, Indiegogo, yeah, because that one lets you keep the money if you don't.
Yeah,
Right.
Yes.
There's a good
Big
one.
thing with
Very
Kickstarter.
good one.
If you don't meet your goal with Kickstarter, you don't get any of the money. So it's all or nothing. Indiegogo allows you to do different things, and now we have Patreon as well, which is another way to support things. And there is, as you might imagine, an Uncanny Magazine Patreon available to you right now if you like what we do.
There are no hints here.
No one's here. Space Unicorn Ranger Corps.
So how about you? So if you haven't done crowdsourcing, what made you pick the structure you did pick? Did you just
I mean, with
either-
me, it's basically like I mean, when I did the first anthology, I lost the publisher because it was a dumb idea for an anthology in the first place. But I basically just found out about publish on demand, realized I could do it cheaply, and then thankfully Kindle came along, and so a lot of my books sales do come on Kindle. And it was just basically, for me, it's like if I have the money, great. If I don't have the money, well, I won't do an anthology this year. But that's the independence of the small press kind of thing.
Yeah.
My press basically has an angel as a publisher.
A
Jorge.
real angel? No.
Yeah, well, no, yeah.
Michael, Raphael, any
yeah.
names?
See it.
That's real. Jorge works as a private investigator for the Stars in the UK. He's got his own chain of private investigator franchises, I guess, in Chile right now.
Is he the one that was?
No, but he's had Liam Neeson paying big bucks to consult on a detective character for right now, so that's got that helps with that.
Nice gig.
Yeah,
Yep.
good deal.
So he's not the phone hacker.
We need Liam Neeson to play an editor.
Absolutely.
He did
An
that.
editor that shoots people.
I would totally help him do his research.
Sign me up.
You're married.
All right. So we
It's just
got
research.
Okay, so we touched a little bit on this, but maybe this would be a good time to talk about things that are pet peeves versus things that we found worked really well.
Answer your email.
Promptly.
Respond in a timely manner. Even if all you're telling me is, I cannot deal with this now, I will reply in further detail in X amount of days' time. Answer your email.
Include your email.
Include your email in your submission, along with your name.
And other contact information.
An address helps.
Yeah, do not fall off the face of the earth,
After I
especially
bu-
as the deadline goes whooshing by.
After I buy your story, do not offer to give it away for free because your audience just doesn't read horror.
That has the ring of a very specific instance.
Also, when I arrange a reading for you, do not get up there and go, I'm sorry, I have not prepared, House of Cards is a really good show, and then read from the boring part of your story.
Yeah.
Basically, act like a grown-up.
Yeah,
A responsible
Don't
one.
ask for much, do you?
A reasonable facsimile of a grown-up, how about that?
Well, yeah, one of these things is that if you do have a contract for a story for an anthology, and you do find that deadline rushing towards you like a freight train, communication is essential. It is far more important that you tell the editor that you're going to be late, that you not tell the editor you're going to be late. I mean, if we know, we can work around it.
Yeah.
We lie about our deadlines like, whoa, but we won't tell you by how much.
No.
But I mean, if we know that your story is going to be 2 weeks late, we can spend that 2 weeks working on the other stories. We have stuff we can do while we wait for you if you tell us.
Freaking Eric Flint has a personal relationship with my production manager. He knows when they're going to the press.
I hate that. I had that problem too with Catherine Valenti. Because she was the editor of Apex, she knew what the absolute drop dead was. And bless her, she's gotten a lot better about deadlines in recent years. But we had an experience where we got a story the day of drop dead. It was a fantastic story. It didn't need any help from me because Catherine Valenti. But yeah, it was one of those things where because she had been the editor of Apex, she knew exactly how long she had for real. And boy, were we sweating.
These gray hairs.
Yeah, exactly.
Eric Flint, yes, Catherine Valenti, right there. Yep.
And if we do give you a contract, please send it back as soon as possible.
Yeah, we can't pay
That
until we
helps.
have that.
No, or many other things we can't do until we have that, so.
Contracts are good. Read them. Read your contracts. Understand your contracts.
Anthology contracts should not be very long or complicated. So, you know, ours is 2 pages max.
That's all ours were.
In real type.
In real words. Like, they're generally generated in English, not legalese. Like, we try really hard to make them comprehensible. And many magazines will actually put sample versions of their contracts on the website. So you can read it ahead of time and determine if you're willing to do what they're asking of you.
This incidentally is a very good idea, just saying. I think one of the things that we talked about before we got started was the whole notion of actually sticking with the guidelines, particularly for themed anthologies.
Yes.
Yes. But that also holds true to some extent to magazines, which don't, you know, sometimes have special issue themes, but often don't. Is that if you're looking at the magazine guidelines and the editor says that they truly hate vampire picks up victim in bar, victim turns out to be vampire hunter stories, just hypothetically, that maybe they're seeing too many of them.
Yeah.
And unless you have written the most fabulous one on the face of the earth, and you can get multiple people to agree that you have written the most fabulous one, then you might not want to send to that particular editor.
Yeah, this is not a challenge accepted kind of situation.
Well, if it is, it's because you already have a long-standing relationship with that editor, and even then it's dicey. Yes.
The Expanded Universe Submission Guidelines, have you ever seen that one?
I have.
It's a comedy and frustration, because it looks like every single story they ever got, that they were
Once
rejected.
they've seen one version of it, they never want to see another
Please,
one
no
again.
aliens as Indians, please put this in one, it was,
But Strange Horizons has a really long list too as a
Yes.
market. They are very clear. We are very tired of the following tropes. List as long as your arm.
Okay.
On the other
Editors
hand,
are grouchy people.
it's true, true.
don't have a
Hostile
child
even.
find something in a field, yeah.
Well, the problem is that even if you've generated this amazing thing for the very first time, it's probably the 27th or 3,000th time we've seen a version of it.
That's very true. Okay, we are gradually inching up toward the end, so there are no questions. There we go, I knew somebody was.
Okay, so we've learned that anthologies are a lot of work, they're frustrating, they don't make a lot of money, they cost a lot of money. What's the appeal of putting together? an
You mean
anthology?
besides the glory?
Right.
It's pretty much just the glory, but no.
Yeah, it's certainly not the pay rate.
There's that.
For me, it's because I like putting. I am someone with artistic inclinations, but not enough artistic ability to match my inclinations. So being an editor, no, seriously, I don't produce fiction. I've produced one paragraph of Doctor Who fan fiction that is the sum total of the fiction I have ever produced. And the Doctor's unconscious by the end of the paragraph, so no. I am not good at writing fiction. I don't want to put the work in that it takes to become good at writing fiction, because I know how much work it is. But I'm really good at looking at other pieces of fiction and going, that's nice, that not so much, that's okay. And I can help people fix their stories, so I do it because this is how I'm artistic. This is the mode in which I am creative. I can herd cats in a generic direction reasonably well, as long as they answer their email. Cats on email.
For me, it was a great way to learn what editors are expecting and what to, and how to craft a story that an editor will like, and also how to edit any other people's stories, see what frustrates me, and see what kind of things I've been repeating doing in my own fiction writing.
Yeah, I like getting paid, and also, go figure. And I also, as a writer myself, I notice that when I edit things, my A game comes out a lot better too, all around.
Yeah.
I think for me, you know, it's the opportunity to read something for the first time, so it's right after an author's written it. And you get to see, you know, the first thing when it's really new and shiny, which can be really great. And I think that also when you do more open calls, you get to the opportunity to read work by authors who are new to you, which can be just, you know, truly amazing. And sometimes the amazing part is, wow, you shouldn't write short fiction, but I love your longer work. That does happen, but you know, but you're on the cutting edge of getting to see that. I will also say, since nobody else has mentioned it, if you happen to have a book that's won awards, that is just the best thing ever.
Yeah, that doesn't suck.
It does not.
It really doesn't suck.
It really, yeah. And there's just something about knowing that you got an group of authors together, you know, you produced something that, you know, people liked working on, and hopefully everybody's still talking to you at the end of it. And you've put something out there that somebody has judged, you know, readable, you know, good reviews are wonderful. Awards are wonderful. These are a lot of validation. I mean, it's a really nice feeling. But I agree that it's also very much a learning experience, especially if you are also a writer, because there are things that you look at and you go, wow, I did that.
Yeah.
Can I second the slush pile? The finding that writer in the slush pile is like open call, because you read so many crappy stories and so many stories that go boring and blah blah. Then you find that one story where you just feel like you've discovered this person. You haven't, because she's written a couple others and other stuff, but you're just like, this is a great writer, and you feel a little bit like the hipster who just found that one record they were gonna love in a year. You just go, yeah, but that's Megan Arkenberg. Definitely read her stuff. She's awesome.
Well, it's especially nice when we actually found, you know, maybe this actually was the first, you know, publication that author had. You know, that's a good fuzzy feeling.
Oh yeah.
So
That's like a punch in the air moment when it's someone's first professional publication or their CIFA qualifying publication. You're like, yes, I have made something glorious.
Yep.
Well, they did, but I put it out there.
I have packaged something glorious.
I have sent you on your way. Go forth, do good things.
Then again, I also started the Catherine Valente fan club on Facebook, actually the defunct one, just to get a story out of her. That was here's your fan club, can I have something? I don't care, it's a reprint, I'm fine.
I love it.
It's now. You started to say something.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, for me, it's all about the George Washington Award. You know, that's the ultimate validation for me. People are willing to give you money for it, and you know, at our anthologies, we absolutely use these as a way to get to know authors that we don't already publish. It is one of the ways that you can come to our attention is to sell a story to one of our anthologies. And for us, it's, you know, for me, it's a chance to solicit stories from people that I'm, you know, interested in, and get, you know, fun new things that I wouldn't necessarily have otherwise seen. So we can target. I like being able to target stuff. So.
Okay, so we've only got a couple of minutes left. If there's no questions, why don't we do any closing statements or thoughts from the panelists?
Bring your A game. Be professional.
Follow the guidelines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else?
And I mean, a lot of the fun of the anthologies is that you can be a lot more independent with it. I mean, as long as you got your great writers, you can like play around with it, have more fun, and do other stuff. And yeah.
We are actually rooting for you. That's important to understand. As much as we have to reject a large percentage of what comes to us, every time we open a new short story submission, we are rooting for this to be the story that makes us punch the air and say, I'm going to publish this, every single time. I have a sigh. My husband talks about the moment where the story falls apart for me. It's not conscious, but if I'm reading submissions and he's in the room, he can tell the moment the story stops working for me because there's this sigh. Aw, you did that. Why'd you do that? Yeah, exactly.
Or, oh, that again.
Yeah.
It's true. Did you have anything else?
Not just that, you know, there are these themed anthologies too, but doing general anthologies I found like doing the Cosmic Tales anthologies was a way for me to get the kind of stories that I wanted to see. We just started a new thing we'll do again next year too, because it's received enough good attention, I think, that we'll do it again. It's a year's best military science fiction and space opera stories.
because those are the kind of things that I like, and I wanted to see more of them. And the we published obviously a lot of that in novel form, but I wanted to see some of the short fiction writers acknowledged too. So it's sort of a way to call attention to that special thing that you want to see, and that's fun to be able to do that.
Is it a short question?
Yeah, when you hit that side, do you then communicate that to the author, saying, why did you do this, or?
No. Okay, here's the thing.
Call them up.
Here's the thing about rejection. My goal is never to crush the spirit of the writer. Because even if this story doesn't work for me, the next one might. And if I deliver a rejection that is soul crushing, they will never send me a story again. Unless they have the thickest skin in the world, in which case, good on them. Our rejections are generally, this didn't work for us, vague. If we give you any further information, that means we have taken the 10 minutes that we could be spending reading a different story. That's encouraging. Like a personalized rejection is I know it sounds weird, but it's encouraging because it means that I liked enough things about this story to tell you about them and to tell you maybe where this didn't work and you want to work on this aspect of it. But 800 submissions in a week. I have a day job. This is not my day job. I'm doing this nights and weekends.
And you're not being fair to the next author.
Yeah, and I'm not being fair to the next author. If you want hardcore rejectomancy explanations of what has gone wrong, and you write secondary world fantasy, you should be submitting to Beneath Ceaseless Skies. Scott Andrews does personalized rejections for every single story because apparently he never needs to sleep. He will give you great feedback, and that's totally worth doing if you can wait long enough for him to give you the feedback. But most editors, in particular in magazine markets, because the stories that come to us are fully cooked, we're not doing a lot of hard editing back and forth. For most things, we just don't have the time. I wish I did, but I also have to I spent most of this morning working on producing ebooks and uploading to Amazon because we go live with the next issue on Tuesday. So I have not looked at the submissions that are sitting in my email because I'm working on producing the magazine right now.
That is a
And I'm gonna agree that I usually just send a form letter unless I like the story enough to do it, or unless I know the guy personally and he helped me out. I want to like that story, and I spent like a month trying to like it, and then I sent him like a novel of what was wrong with it.
Feedback is a time commitment, and
And that is a quick way to burn out as an editor. I've seen it happen. So.
If you want feedback on your stories on a regular basis, find a writing group. Yep. Find a group of people who also want to write and be critiqued. Find ways to critique each other kindly without ripping each other to shreds. There are online versions of this, there are local versions of this. You could set a meetup. It doesn't matter how you do it, but if you need consistent critiques to build your craft, find other people trying to do the same thing and do it that way. Because magazine editors and anthology editors we're on really strict timelines. You have to make choices because we have to sleep eventually. It's not that we don't love you. It really isn't.
Actually, it really
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes it really
But
is.
we will never tell you that because that's mean, and we don't want to be mean.
Some of us are mean, but
Some
anyway,
of us
putting
are.
that aside. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you to the panelists for coming out, and thank you to all of you.
Well moderated.
It's very hard to moderate me. I appreciate it when people do.